In high-pressure or urgent situations, nursing can be an extremely stressful profession. Shocker, I know. I bet you never thought of that. News to you. Take a moment to sit with the bombshell I just dropped. But here's the thing. Your body undergoes that stress for a reason. Your body isn't trying to destroy itself for funsies, it's trying to protect you. In a high-intensity, rapidly changing situation like disaster response, that heightened state of arousal is actually useful. You need to be attentive and alert, you need to be vigilant as things rapidly change, you need to have a store of energy ready to do what needs to be done. But there's a limit. Once you exceed what UCLA professor Dan Siegel called the window of tolerance, you reach hyperarousal. You're no longer focused and responsive, you're all the way into fight or flight mode. Too much energy, too much vigilance. It all congeals into anxiety, poor concentration, even anger. That's when stress stops helping and starts hurting, but there's a further step it can go. If you're not just distracted, but emotionally numb, if you're not just vigilant, but non-stop hyper-vigilant, even way after the fact, if you're not just anxious, but trying to fend off intrusive, spiraling thoughts when you're trying to sleep, you're not just stressed out, you're traumatized. That can be hard to realize in the moment. In the midst of disaster response, you might be thinking about other things. Maybe. You might even think there are more important things to think about, but you'd be wrong about that. In major emergencies like disaster scenarios, your patients need you at your best. If you're not okay, they're not okay either. And in the frenzy of the moment, it's hard to work out what the best way is to protect yourself. Especially when your amygdala is screaming that the best way to protect yourself is to bail out right now. The answer? Figure it out ahead of time. Of course. That's why you're going to make a personal resilience plan, and I'm going to show you how. The basic resilience framework looks like this. First, there's self-awareness and self-regulation. As I said, it can be hard to realize you're undergoing traumatic stress in the moment, so it's worth practicing self-reflection so that you're better able to recognize your stress signals when and as they happen. It also takes having easy, adaptive coping techniques in your back pocket so you can diffuse the stress signals that are doing you harm. Second, there's peer and team support. Nursing is a team effort, especially in disaster scenarios where all hands are on deck. But it's not just about working together, it's about healing together. You are going to need someone to share what you're experiencing with, someone that you feel like you can go to for help whenever it's needed, and someone's going to need you to be that person for them too. Everyone will need a strong peer network so that you can all stay afloat. Third, you need organizational support. It's not just nurses versus the world. Your workplace needs to have your back too. They need to provide mental health resources, they need to hold regular debriefings, and they need to establish protocols for when you're suffering a real challenge to your mental health. Fourth, there should be ongoing training in place. The best way to make good decisions in the heat of the moment, for you and your patients both, is to actually practice it ahead of time. Simulations, scenarios, workshops, and even webinars will keep you sharp so that decision paralysis doesn't set in when stress does. Finally, there's work-life balance. I know, you've probably been told about the importance of work-life balance 1,000 times. And it's hard, especially when you're a nurse. It can be hard to delegate, to say no to things. It can be especially hard to set a hard boundary between nurse life and personal life when it feels like nursing is such a big part of your identity. But some of the worst harm that stress can do is when it comes home with you. When you can't sleep, when you've got intrusive thoughts, when that hypervigilance just seems like it won't clock out for the day. Your personal life needs to be a refuge from the stress. So, for self-awareness and self-regulation, self-awareness comes first. You need to know both what it looks like when you're anxious and burned out, and you need to know what sets off that anxiety. I've already mentioned some signs, but as a reminder, emotional numbness, hypervigilance, even when not at work, and spiraling intrusive thoughts are all signs of anxiety doing you harm. There are plenty of things that can trigger it, and it's worth knowing what does it to you. Examples might include exposure to traumatic events, which is particularly easy to trigger in disaster scenarios, conflict with colleagues, overlong working hours draining your mental and physical energy, or feeling like you can't get a grip on the situation as it rapidly and constantly changes around you. Think back and take stock of previous times things went too far and broke down. What was the event that finally tore it for you? What did it feel like leading up to it and afterward? Keep track of both sides of it so you can recognize it when it happens again. Once you're self aware, you need to self regulate. There are lots of ways to do this, some of which you've probably been introduced to. Practice your mindfulness techniques like box breathing, sense grounding, or even just physical activity. More than that, identify which ones are most effective at pulling you out of that maladaptive headspace. Different people respond best to different techniques, and knowing which ones suit you best means that you won't be scrambling to try something ultimately unhelpful in the moment. All of this is important in and of itself, but it also helps inform the second part of your plan: peer and team support. It's good for you to be able to recognize your own triggers and symptoms of burnout, but it's even better when your teammates have a chance of recognizing it too. Share your triggers and symptoms with your coworkers so they can keep an eye out for it, and, of course, do the same for them. Everyone responds differently, and if one of you is level headed while the other isn't, awareness that someone's really going through it is a chance to help pull them back from the brink. Share coping techniques as well. You might learn about some that you haven't tried before. Once your team has your back, your org needs to as well. Look at your healthcare plan to find out what mental health support is on offer. It's important for your team to look out for you, but it is quite literally a therapist or social worker's job to help with your mental health. If your ability to function is impaired, if your anxiety is becoming chronic, if it feels like you can't stand it anymore, get help from a professional. That's what they're there for. On top of that, your workplace needs plans and procedures in place. Your check-in protocol should make time for discussions around mental health and well-being so that you can all get a read on how everybody's doing, if somebody's in trouble, and what they need most to get them out of it. Have a risk assessment plan to determine potential hazards, who's at high risk for those hazards, how likely they are, and how to reduce them. And naturally, as the workplace evolves, there should be reviews and revisions to keep these up to date and suitable for everyone. Underpinning your resilience is training. It's all well and good to know what your triggers might be and what coping techniques you can use, but you'll want to train yourself to actually recognize those triggers and physically perform those coping techniques. Self-awareness is a skill you can improve, and things like breathing exercises, muscle relaxation, and sense grounding are much easier to do in the heat of the moment if you've practiced them plenty ahead of time. Seek out training workshops or webinars, see if your organization will provide them for you, and make sure your entire team has access to them and keeps up with them. Train regularly so you keep your techniques sharp. Then, finally, there's work-life balance. It can be hard to set that boundary. Your work is important, and it's easy for it to become a core part of your identity. But even if you think of yourself as a nurse, first and foremost, you're also a human being with a human body. The body needs rest, and if your time outside of work isn't protected, you'll never get that rest properly. Set limits on your availability, learn to delegate, and, when necessary, when to just say no. Of course, giving yourself time to rest doesn't mean much when that rest isn't healthy. Put together a regular bedtime routine, limiting your screen time and allowing for a natural, gradual shutdown process so you can get high quality sleep. Balance your diet, stay hydrated, and rely on lean proteins, fruit, and vegetables. Try and keep away from caffeine and sugar just as much as you can stand. Sometimes coffee might feel like a superpower, but eventually you'll crash. There's no way to completely avoid high pressure situations in nursing. It's part of the job. It's an important part of the job. Patients need to rely on you to respond quickly in the event of a disaster. But it doesn't have to be a traumatic nightmare that you can't escape. There's a way out and through. You just have to plan that route ahead of time. Recognize your risks and limits, have techniques to bring yourself back from the brink when they happen, make sure your team is looking out for each other, and make sure you're being kind to yourself, your mind, and your body. Put together your personal resilience plan, and when things seem like they're at their worst, you'll know what to do.